I lost 20 kg, that's about 3 stone in 2019 to 2020, and I've kept that off ever since. In this video, I'm going to be running you through exactly what I'd do if I wanted to lose that weight again. I'm going to be focusing on 7 habits and principles that I'd be using to make sustainable change. That means losing weight and keeping it off for the long term. But before we get to that, hi, I'm Holly, a personal trainer and nutritionist, and I help people lose weight and keep it off through building better habits. So let's get started with habit number 1, setting your calorie deficit. Now, to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. That's where calories in are lower than calories out. That energy imbalance means your body needs to tap into its reserves, like your fat stores. So how big should your calorie deficit be? Well, there are roughly 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. So if you divide that by 7, because there are 7 days in a week, you should be in a roughly 500 calorie deficit per day. But if you're in a bigger body, you might be able to go for a slightly more aggressive deficit and aim to lose a pound to 2 pounds per week. And if you're in a smaller body, you might want to go for a more conservative deficit and aim to lose around about half pound per week. But the best number is going to be one that you can sustain for the long run, well, long enough to lose weight. And if you don't know what your calorie deficit is, I'd advise that you use a calorie calculator. I've left a link to mine in the description box. Just pop your details in there and you'll be able to calculate your calories. Now, the rest of these habits are going to help us to create and sustain this calorie deficit. But in order to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Capiche? And in habits number 5 and 7, I'm going to be breaking down how to structure your calories within a day and what to eat. Habit number 2 is increasing your step count. In a 2017 study, the mean number of steps taken in a day for UK adults was 5,444. But is that enough? Well, from a purely weight loss perspective, the more steps that you do, the more calories that you'll burn, and the more that you can hypothetically eat and lose weight. But I don't believe that you earn food through exercise. And I think that's a dangerous mindset to get into and can really impact your relationship with food. But from a logical perspective, I think that's important to know. So what impacts do steps have on your general health? Well, data from a 2025 systematic review and meta-analysis, which is just a study of a lot of studies, suggests that you can get the majority of benefits from doing around 5,000 to 7,000 steps per day. There are still benefits to doing more than this, but by averaging 7,000 steps per day, you're reducing your risk of all-cause mortality by 47%. There's a 25% lower risk of cardiovascular disease and a 47% decrease in mortality risk from cardiovascular disease, a 37% lower risk of cancer mortality, a 14% lower risk of type 2 diabetes, a 38% lower risk of dementia, and a 22% lower risk of depressive symptoms. So where should you start when it comes to increasing your steps? Well, I'd recommend starting by looking at your phone or your watch data and seeing what you're currently averaging per day. Then I'd set your first goal as 1k higher than that. That's just an extra 10 minutes of walking per day. And I'd recommend adding this in one of 3 places: before work, after work, or lunch. I'd work your way up until you're at least 7k, but personally I'd be aiming for that 9 to 10k mark, just to be on the safe side but still working up in those small increments. Habit number 3 is ditching the perfectionism. How many times have you started to make a change, but the second that you couldn't be perfect, you'd fallen off track? And you'd bounce between all and nothing to all and nothing until, well, you got here. Well, all you're doing is creating these stormy seas, and that's not what we need to make progress. Instead, you need steady seas. Yes, you'll have fluctuations, but you're not constantly fighting at these extremes. And the way that you do that is through the next best thing mindset. Let me give you an example. Say you've had a stressful day at the office and you were planning on going to the gym tonight, but your 5 p.m. meeting ran until 5:30, and you're not going to be able to get your full gym session in because you need to get home. All or nothing thinking would mean, well, if I can't go to the gym and get that perfect session in, then I'll just do nothing at all. But the next best thing shows that this is a spectrum in between. So the next best thing might be doing 2 sets instead of 3, or maybe even just 1 set. It might involve shorter rest times or supersetting exercises. It might be just heading straight home and doing a home workout instead, or even just rescheduling that workout in for another day. But it involves doing something and not just bouncing to these extremes. That's the secret to consistency. And if you can do what you intend to do at least 80% of the time, then the other 20% you do the next best thing. You'll be right, as they say in Yorkshire. Habit number 4 is working out at the gym. You don't need to work out to lose weight, but you'll be a lot better off if you do work out. Think of your calorie deficit like a calorie budget cut. In times of a budget cut, your account auditor, in this case your body, is going to look at its expenses and it's going to try to get rid of the most expensive thing first. And for us, that's muscle, because muscle burns 10 to 13 calories per kilogram, whereas fat only burns 4 to 6 calories per kilogram. So your body is more inclined to get rid of the muscle unless you tell it otherwise. And you do this by doing 2 things. Number 1, doing resistance training and lifting weights, and number 2, eating a sufficient amount of protein. Lifting weights doesn't have to be a complicated process. Here's the exact structure that I'd follow. Hit the gym at least 2 times a week and complete 2 full body sessions, like the ones on screen right now. Each week you're going to lift a little bit heavier or push for another rep. That's going to help you progressively overload and continue to challenge your body. Alright, here's some quick fire questions about working out. Can you work out at home? Yes, but you'll be limited by the equipment that you have. Can you use your body weight? Absolutely, that's a fine place to start, but you'll need a way to progressively overload this or make it harder as time goes on. I don't feel confident in the gym. What can I do? Well, you can start by doing things that you do feel confident doing, like walking on the treadmill, but then you just need to crack on by spending more time in the gym. Push your comfort zone step by step. You don't have to jump to doing a full-blown workout to start off with. But in order to get more confident in the gym, you're gonna have to spend some time in the gym. Now, the second thing that I mentioned was eating a sufficient amount of protein. I'm gonna be talking more about that in habit 7. So coming on to habit number 5, having an eating structure. So let's say you're aiming to eat 1,800 calories in a day as your deficit. You're going to split that up into 3 meals and 1 snack, and ideally you're going to be eating that at the same time every day. This way you're making food predictable and making it a habit to eat those meals. You're going to aim for the majority of your calories to be in at meal times because that's going to help keep you fuller. In the 1,800 calorie example, I'd allocate 500 calories to breakfast, lunch and dinner and 200 to 300 calories to your snack, depending on what you've had for the other calories for the day. As much as possible, plan your day ahead and pre-track your calories in. It'll make it much easier to make sure you don't accidentally end up eating over. Habit number 6 is your water intake. With the increase in your steps and starting to exercise that little bit more, you might be getting sweatier. So it's possibly time to up your water intake. Now, the amount of water that everybody needs will vary from person to person, but typically people land between the 2 to 3 litres per day mark. If you're currently under the 3 litres per day mark, I'd start by adding an extra 500 ml per day and then doing the P test. If you're in the darker ranges, it's time to drink more. And if you're in the lighter ranges, you're probably alright with where you're at. A slight note on this for people who have periods: if you are near your period, you might see a little bit of blood in your wee, or if you are on your period, you might see a little bit of blood in your wee. That's nothing to worry about, so just do your dehydration test outside of that wee. And before we get to that final habit, if you've enjoyed this video and want to learn more about losing weight and keeping it off, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. Habit number 7 is volume eating. Foods like chocolate crisps and sweets, you know, those hyperpalatable foods, are low volume, high calorie. That means that they're usually pretty calorie dense. Foods like fruit, vegetables and lean proteins, on the other hand, you can eat a high volume of them for the same calories, meaning that they're quite a calorie sparse food. Now, eating more food like this and less food like this is a really good way to stay full when you're in a deficit and when you're out of a deficit. Therefore, you want the majority of your nutrition to come from foods like this. Now, a really easy way to do that is to split your plate into 3 component parts. A quarter of your plate wants to be protein, think things like chicken, tofu, fish. A quarter of your plate wants to be carbohydrates, think things like rice, pasta, bread, potatoes. And half of your plate wants to be plants, think fruit, veg and salad. Use that structure at every meal, but if that doesn't work for your brain, here's a different way to think about those targets. Protein wise, you want to be making sure that you've got 1.5 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of protein per day. Plant wise, you want to be aiming to get in at least 30 different plants across the space of the week. And just remember that you're focusing on what you do over time, not what you do overnight. So if on average you can follow these principles, you'll be in a good spot. And if you want to see my opinion on some of the current weight loss trends at the moment, then you should check out this video next.